All right, let's move into the next block of 10. Number 40, cornerback Jalen Ramsey from the Miami Dolphins. Number 39, guard Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs. Number 38, also guard Chris Lindstrom from the Atlanta Falcons. 37, Jesse Bates, safety from the Atlanta Falcons. 36, Trent McDuffie, cornerback from the Chiefs. Number 35, cornerback as well, Patrick Surtain II from the Denver Broncos. Number 34, edge Aiden Hutchinson, Detroit Lions. Number 33, linebacker Roquan Smith from the Baltimore Ravens. Number 32, wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions. And number 31, King Derrick Henry from the Baltimore Ravens. What jumps out to you from this group of 10, Trev?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at this list, I would like to sit here and say I think Jalen Ramsey is better than the 40th best player in the NFL. It's sort of tough to find a spot for him when you move him up, especially for as good as some of these young corners are playing, right? How good Trent McDuffie was last season, how good Patrick Surtain is, and how much faith you have in Patrick Surtain being an elite corner throughout his career. So maybe you could argue as a whole, like the cornerback group could go up, but with the corners being where they are, it's sort of tough to move Jalen any higher. So naturally, I look at his name and I think that he should be higher than 40, but it is difficult in this exercise to move him up a little bit more. Maybe I'd move him truly like right behind Trent McDuffie or right within that group where it could be all three of those guys kind of right in the middle of the top 35, but it's not too much. Aiden Hutchinson, to me at 34, is the one who I think could even go up a little bit more. I know that when you kind of posed the initial list to the PFF staff, like that was one that I shouted out of, I think he should go a little higher. I think he was like low 40s initially for you, but you look at what he was able to do last season. Only the fifth player in the last 18 seasons to have a 100 pressure single season and didn't get recognized for it as a first or second team All-Pro. I think Hutchinson's awesome. Now, do I think that he is at the level that like a Nick Bosa, a Myles Garrett, a Max Crosby is? No. But when I look at Hutchinson, to be fair to my own criticism before, hey, if you want to say that a guy's got to go up, you got to find a place for him. I would probably put Hutchinson like right below his teammate, Penei Sewell at number 28. I'd probably sneak him into the top 30 there, so I'd raise him up a couple of spots. The rest of the group looks pretty solid. I mean, Derrick Henry at 31 initially, to me, I was like, feels a little high for Derrick Henry. And then you go look at it and you go, God damn, he was still good and his offensive line sucks. So it's just, he's one of the best 35, 30 players in the NFL. He still is. So I initially looked at that and said that he's got to come down a little bit. But after looking at it, I think that he is appropriately placed. The last one that I would say is Thuney. And I think Thuney is another one who I look at him at 39, unbelievably consistent. You mentioned it in there, and correctly so. One of the best pass blocking offensive guards that we have in the game. I was looking at his career PFF numbers as I was sort of questioning his ranking on 39, and just his whole career, man. He's just been solid. He's been so steady at what he does. He's been one of the best high floor and even high ceiling guards that we have in the league. And so I understand putting him at 30 just because of he's got so much longevity, so much time that he has had playing the game at the high level. I would put, if we're just going like offensive line evaluation, like I would put Laramie Tunsil above him on a list like this. I maybe put Tyron Smith above him in a list like this. And so that's sort of the conversation that we're having there. So I'd bring Thuney down a little bit, but it is worth noting just how steady this guy has been playing the position at a very high level, even though there are some tackles that I think maybe bring a little bit more value that I have a little bit higher than him.
Yeah, a few things to throw in there in terms of sort of answers or expanding on what you said. I think the thing that keeps Tunsil as low as he is for me is he's genuinely not a particularly good run blocker. And while if you were choosing the dynamic to have your left tackle, that's the way you want it, right? Elite level pass blocker and so-so run blocker, definitely better than the other way around. It is, however, something that distances him from like the other top tackles on a list like the PFF 50. Like the other guys we're talking about here, even guys like guys that aren't on the list, like Tyron Smith, like his thing is more age and injuries, but Tyron Smith is a better run blocker than Laramie Tunsil. So I think that's something that when we're talking about the best of the best, that is why Tunsil is lower than he would be if we were just looking at his pass blocking, which would put him amongst, the very top tackles in all of football. Cornerbacks generally, I think, are really difficult to rank on a list like this because
Yeah.
we know the volatility inherent in cornerback play. Like if you go back a couple of years, you would have Jair Alexander probably in the top 10, right? The guy had one of the best cornerback seasons we've seen. He was an ascending, young, up-and-coming player. All of it's good. There's no downside. You'd say he's one of the best 10 players in football. Jalen Johnson basically just had the season that Jair Alexander had when you would have been saying that about him. So when a guy's coming off an amazing year, you're like, I mean, are we buying too high? Like, is this unfairly inflating where he should be? And then when guys are not coming off a good year, it's like, this probably isn't who he is either. Like, Patrick Surtain was not great last year, but I don't think anybody is saying, like, Patrick Surtain stinks, right? The Denver defense was awful. Cornerbacks are always a little bit contingent on what's around them. So I find the volatility of cornerback play as a general thing really difficult when you're then comparing him to, you know, edge rushers who by and large control what they're doing way more. Because if you get 80, 90, 100 pressures, okay, it might not make a massive difference to wins and losses if the rest of the defense stinks. You know, see Myles Garrett a year ago. But it's obvious that you had a really good year, right? You can still have a really good year and get lit up by a cornerback or as a cornerback if everything else around you stinks. So I definitely found cornerbacks a struggle to rank on this list. And I guess the flip side of that is with the Aiden Hutchinson thing, there are so many amazing edge rushers right now that I struggle to know sort of how many of them to push really high in the rankings as well.
Sure.
Because like Aiden Hutchinson, the way I've been kind of describing that for a while is Hutchinson was one of a few guys that had an all-pro caliber season, but there were 4 or 5 guys better than him. So he's not an all-pro last year, right? Now, does that mean that he should be in the top 10 and it's just that the top 10 should be like 7 edge rushers? Maybe. I mean, I don't know that that's wrong. And then the last one to say, when I was asking for feedback, a lot of people were like, Derrick Henry's too high, move him down. Derrick Henry was the one hill I was willing to die on with the rankings and say, no, at the very minimum, Derrick Henry is the 31st best player in the NFL. He is not declining. The Tennessee offensive line stinks, and I am very, very convinced that Derrick Henry is going to be one of the 31 best players in football this year.
Yeah. When I looked at Derrick Henry at 31, I was like, oh, that's too high for Derrick Henry. And then you look more into it and you go, it's really not though, actually. So yeah, look, I think that Hutchinson's appropriately ranked behind those edge rushers that unfortunately clog up getting first and second team All-Pro.
Right.
I just think he's closer to that. And so you're right. Yeah, it feels weird in an exercise where you're just flooding the top of these lists with edge rushers. But I do think we are in I don't know if it's golden age, but we're in an incredible time of top tier edge rush play with the guys that we have. I mean, every single season defensive player of the year is like a 5-player race at minimum.
Yeah.
At minimum, defensive player of the year is a 5-player race between Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Max Crosby, Nick Bosa, and Micah Parsons. Every single year, before the ball is even snapped in week 1, it's a 5-man race, and it's a damn good 5-man race for defensive player of the year. And that's kind of just the situation that we're in. So I think you had Max Crosby at 18, if I remember correctly. So I wouldn't put Hutchinson above that, but again, I would probably put Hutchinson somewhere within the top 30. I'd bring him up a little bit. You know, people in the comments are talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's too low. I think 32 is like, it's appropriate for him. You know, if you want to move Amon-Ra St. Brown up a couple of spots, like I'll put him above Andrew Thomas, maybe get him in there at like 28. But I wouldn't put him above Penei Sewell. I wouldn't put him above Quinnen Williams. I wouldn't put him above Kyle Hamilton. I wouldn't put him above A.J. Brown. And that's where we then get that next receiver, because you have at 25 and 24, A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase. So I wouldn't put Amon-Ra St. Brown above either of those guys. And so that's sort of where we're at here. Amon-Ra, I think some people in the chat, and they're caping for their guy, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's really talented. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but he feels like one where I imagine if you got pushback about a player, it'd probably be him not being in the top 30. But then you go, okay, where would you place him? And if you're only placing him, 3 spots higher than where he is, then he's kind of right around the area that he should be. So maybe, okay, you can move him up a little bit, but it's still within the range. The players that you really want to talk about moving up a ton are guys that are, closer to 8, 10 spots that you would want to see them higher. So yeah, just wanted to, I saw the chat talking a lot about Amon-Ra St. Brown, so I wanted to throw that in there.
This is where I think the exercise that we talked about before starts to get really difficult. Like, yeah, this guy's too low. Okay, cool. Who does he go ahead of? Because right now we're getting into the territory where everyone we're about to list off is like, has an argument to be the best player at their position, or is like an unquestioned game changer, or, you know, just a dominant force at what they do. Maybe you can find one or two guys that you want to take him below, or take him above, but it's really difficult to say, okay, this guy's 10 spots too low. We're going to find 10 guys that he needs to jump from the remaining list. So